So I don't know if I'm willing to take that risk. I'm not that big of a risk taker. My dopamine levels, I think, are fairly normal. I don't think I have to have a huge amount of stimulation to enjoy myself or be happy. There's different levels of rewards for everybody, right? Um, we've talked about this in my class, where some of us are goal oriented, very goal oriented, and like um, me working on my podcast, I will encourage myself to do that by saying, well, as soon as you get this recorded, then you can go wrap Christmas presents, which I enjoy doing. Or, no, you're not going to go do this. You're not going to go downstairs and make cookies until you finish this work. So I'm goal oriented, and it gives me a dopamine rush. Yay, I did it. You feel good about yourself. You're accomplishing things. Um, Anytime we have students doing homework, this is how we brought it up in class. They were talking about how they would say, I'm going to go eat, but I'm not going to eat until after I finish my assignment. And so that really is the catalyst for them. They motivate themselves to get that work done, and then they reward themselves by getting to eat dinner. And we know you don't want to use food necessarily for a reward, but I'm telling you, it's probably one of the most effective ways to stimulate dopamine. So for some people aren't interested in that, but certainly I'm a foodie, so I am. This, combined with dysfunctional prefrontal cortex, whose primary function is to regulate complex cognitive, emotional, and behavioral function. Remember that prefrontal cortex, that gray matter that we continuously talk about in these podcasts, when it's maldeformed, when it's not developed as it should. People who have a lot of these issues that we're talking about have a much smaller frontal cortex, but you can regrow it. That's entirely the purpose of us discussing all of this. What is it we need to do? What works best? What doesn't work? What works with this type of person? What works with this type of person? It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's certainly worthwhile. And I think we have the answers. We've just got to put all of our information together. So someone that has the combined dysfunctional prefrontal cortex may result in the increase in desire and reduction in control of pleasure-seeking behavior. So there's an increase in the desire. I've got to do this. I want to do this. And then reduction of control. I can't keep myself from doing this. I can't stop myself from doing it. I enjoy it so much. I need it so much. So you have this great desire that keeps increasing, and at the same time, a reduction in your ability to stop yourself. That's a behavioral issue. We have a lot of children in schools who can't control their temper, who can't control they're just so easily stimulated, as far as they get really excited very easily. It's hard to bring them down once they get that high. A lot of times it is aggressive, or maybe you've got someone that has ADHD who they get incredibly happy, like crazy happy, and they can't sit still, and they're just over the top, and it's hard to bring them down. It's very hard to bring them down. These type of behaviors results in a compulsive and addictive pattern of behaviors. That's why we have serial killers, right? They get excited about this idea that they want to do, and then they go through the whole process, and whatever happens that gets them off on it, and then they come down off of that high, and then several days later, several months later, several years later, they get that same build up of anxiety and need and desire to do this. And then they just can't control themselves anymore. They go do it, and then they come off that high. So that's the cycle that we're looking at here. And that's true of most all serial killers, that's the pattern that we're seeing. You see that there's a desire and a need to fulfill that desire and the lack of control to stop yourself from doing it. There's a lot of things I'd like to do. There's a lot of things I'd like to do in this world, but I can't. And I know that. And I control myself. If you are a religious person, if you're a spiritual person, we know if you believe in God, that's part of what helps control us. We try not to sin, although we know we do every day. But that is one of those things that helps us control ourselves. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the ability to do that. And it's not something we can just say, oh, we just need to give them a pill and they'll be fine. That's not the case in many, many of our situations. Research also suggests that low levels of serotonin there, oh my goodness, I hate this word, serotonergic activity indicates impulsivity and self-destructive violence. Obviously that means like a serotonin-based activity that indicates impulsivity. It's easier to say that than that big word. While increased levels indicate aggression. So if they have low levels of this serotonin, it can indicate impulsivity and self-destructive violence, but increased levels indicate aggression. And I think that those overlap some because impulsivity, self-destruction, and aggression go hand in hand. When, this show on TV called Snapped, that's what you have there. You have someone who's impulsive, who doesn't think through their actions. They're self-destructive. They don't care how it affects them. They just move forward and do, in the heat of the moment. And they're aggressive. So I think that overlaps quite a bit. Heidi and Solomon stated that men with low levels of monoamine oxidase A, MAOA, an enzyme involved in the breakdown of neuroepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin, are more likely to be sentenced with a violent crime by the time they reach 26 years of age as compared to men with high MAOA activity. So that's something that you could screen for. You could screen for that. Now, is there some bias attached to that? Of course there is. But we do screens all the time, different stuff. I feel like if we really wanted to help our children, instead of just guessing or trying a million different things, you could literally do a screening to see what levels of monoamine oxidase A they have in their system. And someone who has low levels of that, we can say with pretty good accuracy that they will be sentenced with violent crime by the time they reach 26 years of age. How can we intercept that? How do we stop that? How do we prevent that? We treat them when they're young. Before they reach that, age of 26, where they're in jail for a violent crime. That's what we do with everything, right? It's what we do with our flu shots, our all of our shots that COVID vaccines, all that. We're trying to prevent it from being worse than it would be if we don't get those. It's part of our everyday life, and why people get upset about that is I just don't understand. But theorists have also speculated about genetic components of criminal behavior and serial killing. Mednick, Brennan, and Candle discovered that male adoptees whose biological fathers were criminals and adoptive fathers were non-criminals displayed a higher rate of criminality compared to male adoptees where both their biological and adoptive fathers were non-criminals. When both the biological and adoptive fathers were criminals, rate of criminality was higher still. More adoption studies provide evidence of how a combination of genetic and environmental risk factors contribute toward individuals indulging in criminal behavior. One such study found that if a child's biological and adoptive parents are both violent, 40% will end up being criminals, as compared to 12.1% who will be criminals only because of the presence of the genetic factor. So we are literally able to say with a high level of confidence that just the presence of the genetic factor gives us some level of concern that you're going to have someone that participates in violent behavior. But we know for sure if a child's biological and adoptive parents are both violent, that 40% will end up being criminals. That should terrify us as well. That should terrify us. We do not live in a world right now where the average family has, the father figure that goes to work and cares for the family, takes care of the family, and the wife who stays home to care for the children or works a part-time job, works in the school, whatever. We just don't, that's not the norm anymore. That is not the norm. There's many more single parent families, and that causes a lot of issues. I know there are millions out there who are single parents doing a wonderful job, but if your child has any of these indicators, they are at a greater risk. They're at a greater risk. No one's saying for sure it's going to happen. Unfortunately, it's one of those things we won't know until it happens. But if we have these markers, if we have these things that tell us, okay, this person meets all of these things on this list, like the ACEs, they meet all of these things, they're at a higher risk than other people. And it statistically, it is absolutely accurate. Psychosocial perspectives. So, research on the psychosocial issues or psychosocial causes of serial killing points to the likelihood that childhood experiences, particularly abuse, loneliness, and abandonment, lead serial killers to commit their crimes. And abandonment, by the way, also includes children who were not attached to the mother or other caregiver. We need that attachment. Mackey and Emmerman claimed that the presence of a father or a father figure during childhood prevents or reduces violent and aggressive behavior during adulthood. Holmes and DeBurger suggested that most serial killers are born to parents out of marriage, presumably increasing the rate at which the killers were raised without one of their parents. Hickey found that among a group of 62 male serial killers, 48% faced some kind of rejection by either parent or another important person in their life. And this may be one of the most important things you ever learn. It's sad to say, because we live in a world that's so easy to get a divorce. We have to learn that marriage is constant work. We have to learn that it's best for our children if we have parents that stay together and are positive and aren't engaging in criminal activity, that kind of thing, or on drugs. I'm talking about someone who is actually contributing to society in a positive way. I think that's why therapy is so very important for our children, but also these parents. If you can co-parent successfully, and your children still feel like they have a stable home life, even after a divorce, you are so far ahead of the game. It's crazy. And unfortunately, I'll tell you, when you are working with younger children, parents tend to be very controlling when it comes to what happens to their young child. They want the kid all week, long, and the father only gets them 2 days a week or on every other weekend, those kind of things. And I've always thought that was, quite unfair. They need that father figure just as often in their life as they need the mother. But think about it. If we so easily throw away a marriage when there's some chance that it could work, we need to give it every opportunity we can. If